The first time John set foot on the planet Vayar, he thought he had walked into a dream. The skies were not like Earth's skies, no. They carried two suns, one golden and one pale blue, and their light poured down on gardens that shimmered, as if the leaves themselves were carved from glass. Every flower released a faint glow, and the air carried music, not from instruments, but from the wind that whistled gently through crystal branches. It was a place that felt too fragile for war, too pure for soldiers, and John was a soldier. A human, one of the first allowed to serve as an escort to the royal family of the Vayari. To him it felt strange. Humans were still newcomers in the great council of galactic species. They were younger, smaller, often dismissed as too impulsive and too raw. Yet here he was, standing guard at the gates of a palace that looked like it had been sculpted by the stars themselves. He had been trained to stay still, to keep his hands on his weapon, to watch for threats, but even soldiers had eyes, and John's eyes could not stop wandering across the breathtaking sights of the Vayari kingdom. He thought nothing here could surprise him anymore. He was wrong, because that was the day he met her. Princess Sarah. She did not arrive with trumpets or guards at her side. She did not wear jewels heavy enough to break her neck. She simply walked into the gardens barefoot, her long dress trailing over the glowing grass, her silver hair shining in the twin sunlight. John noticed something unusual at once. Her eyes. They were pale, cloudy, unfocused. Eyes that looked at everything yet seemed to see nothing. Sarah was blind, and yet, the way she carried herself, it was as if she could see more than anyone else. She did not stumble, did not hesitate. She moved with a calm grace, her head tilted slightly as though listening to whispers carried on the wind. John froze where he stood, unsure if he should bow, salute, or simply remain still. She stopped a few steps away, tilting her head toward him. "You are the human," she said softly. Her voice was like music, gentle, curious, with a touch of wonder. John cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Highness, John Carter, Royal Guard for today at least." He gave a stiff half-bow, embarrassed at how clumsy he sounded. Sarah smiled faintly. "John Carter," she repeated as if tasting the name. "Tell me, what color is your world?" He blinked, unsure what she meant. "My world? Yes, Earth." Her hands folded neatly in front of her. "I was told humans come from a blue and green planet, but I cannot imagine what blue or green feels like. Will you describe it to me?" John hesitated. No one had ever asked him to describe colors before. He shifted his weight, searching for words, feeling oddly nervous under her unfocused gaze. Finally, he said, "Blue. Feels like the ocean when the waves are calm. It's the color of the sky when you breathe deep and feel peace in your chest. Green. Green is the smell of fresh grass after rain. It's the taste of new beginnings. It's the sound of life growing." Sarah tilted her head again, listening as though each word painted a picture in her mind. A smile spread across her face. "Your words are more beautiful than the colors themselves, John Carter." Something inside him softened at that. He had been called many things in his life: soldier, guard, even troublemaker. But never had anyone told him his words were beautiful. From that moment, the garden no longer felt like just another place he was ordered to protect. It felt like the beginning of something else. Over the following days, Sarah often wandered the gardens at the same time John was on duty. At first he thought it was coincidence, but soon he realized she came because she wanted to talk. She asked him about Earth's oceans, about the color of fire, about the way humans laughed when they were truly happy. She asked what rain sounded like on rooftops and what snow tasted like on your tongue. Each time John tried his best to explain. He had never been good with poetry, but somehow, around her, the words came easier. Maybe it was the way she leaned toward his voice, as if every sound mattered. Maybe it was the way her pale eyes seemed to look right through him, not seeing him, but knowing him. And then one evening, as the suns dipped low and the glowing flowers began to close, Sarah reached out her hand. Slowly, carefully, she touched his face. First his jaw, then his nose, then the curve of his lips. Her fingers trembled. Her voice was quiet. "Now I know you." John's heart thudded so hard it almost broke through his chest. He was a soldier, trained for war, trained to be hard and unshakable. But in that moment, with her hand memorizing his face, he felt more fragile than glass. That was the first time he understood. This blind alien princess, who could not see the world, was already showing him more than he had ever seen before. John never expected to become more than a shadow in Princess Sarah's life. He was a soldier after all, an outsider. His job was to stand guard, to be invisible, to fade into the background like the stone walls of the palace. And yet, the days that followed proved something different, because Sarah asked for him. It started with small requests. She would walk in the gardens, and instead of taking her usual handmaidens, she would say, "Let the human walk with me today." The palace servants frowned, but they obeyed. And so John found himself walking at her side, his boots crunching against the glowing grass, while she asked him about colors, about scents, about sounds he remembered from Earth. Soon it became more than colors. She wanted to know about laughter, about love, about sorrow. "Tell me," she said one evening as they sat beneath the crystal trees. "What does a smile look like?" John scratched the back of his neck. "Well, a smile is when someone's lips turn upward. It means happiness. Or sometimes it means someone is pretending to be happy even when they're not. But the real kind, the true smile, it shows in the eyes. You don't just see it, you feel it." Sarah turned her face toward him, her pale eyes thoughtful. "I cannot see smiles, but I can hear them. I can hear yours even now." John froze, realizing he was smiling without meaning to. Somehow around her it happened easily. Over time their conversations grew longer. What began as short exchanges became hours of talking. Nights where the stars glowed above them, and still they sat. Her listening, him fumbling for words he never thought he had. He told her about Earth's forests, where tall trees reached for the heavens, and about city streets alive with noise, where lights glimmered like stars on the ground. He told her about his childhood, about running barefoot through mud, about the smell of bread baking in his mother's kitchen. Sarah listened to every word as if it were treasure. In return, she told him about Veyari customs, how her people believed that every sound carried memory, that a song could hold the spirit of someone long gone. She explained how she recognized people not by sight, but by the rhythm of their voices, by the way they breathed between sentences. "Voices are like fingerprints," she said. "No two are the same. Yours, I could never mistake for another." One night while the palace was quiet and the twin moons floated above, Sarah asked a question that caught John off guard. "Humans fear the dark?" John thought about it. "Sometimes. When we're children, we fear it because we imagine monsters. When we're older, we fear it because we cannot see what waits ahead. But sometimes the dark can be peaceful. Like when you're lying under the stars and you realize how small you are, but also how lucky you are to be alive." Sarah smiled faintly. "Then perhaps I have lived in peace all my life." Her words hit him deep. She had never seen a star, yet she spoke as if she understood them better than anyone. She had never seen a sunrise, yet she carried a light inside her that warmed everyone near her. John began to realize something dangerous, something he tried to bury at first. He was falling for her. It made no sense. She was a princess of an ancient and noble race. He was just a soldier from a young, underestimated species. They lived in different worlds, different stations. And yet, each time she reached for his arm, each time her hand brushed against his heart betrayed him. One evening, as they walked, she stopped suddenly and turned toward him. Slowly, she lifted her hand and touched his face again, tracing his jaw, the curve of his lips. "Why do you let me do this?" she whispered. John swallowed hard. "Because you want to. Her fingers trembled, and she said softly, "No, it's because you want me to." His breath caught. She was blind, yes, but she saw straight through him. She could feel what he was trying to hide. John looked away, forcing himself to stay silent. But deep down, he knew the truth. He didn't just protect her because it was his duty. He protected her because she had become his heart. And for Sarah, though she could not see him, she began to memorize him in other ways. The sound of his footsteps, the way his voice softened when he spoke only to her, the warmth of his presence when he stood nearby. To her, these things painted a picture far more vivid than any set of eyes ever could. Two souls from different worlds, a human soldier and a blind alien princess, slowly weaving a bond that no rule, no law, and no barrier of species could undo. And though neither of them dared to speak it yet, love was already blooming. John had always known their friendship was dangerous, a human soldier and a Veeri princess. It was the kind of story that could not exist without whispers, without judgment. But he had never realized just how strong the storm would become until the day the counselors saw them together. It happened, in the Great Hall. Sarah had insisted that John guide her in, refusing the hands of her usual attendants. She walked beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her pale eyes focused forward. To John, it was natural. She trusted him. To the counselors, it was scandal. Gasps spread across the chamber. Murmurs rippled like fire through dry grass. The princess walks with the human. This is shameful. What will the king say? The king did not stay silent for long. His voice boomed across the hall, sharp and heavy with fury. "Sarah, you dare present yourself with a soldier from a newborn race? You bring shame to this throne." Sarah flinched at the words, but she did not release John's arm. Her voice was calm but firm. "Father John is my guard. He is loyal. He is kind. He has shown me more than any noble ever has." The king's face darkened. "He is human. Their species has barely stepped into the stars, and already they think themselves worthy to touch royalty. I will not allow this disgrace." John bowed. Quickly, heart pounding. "Your Majesty, forgive me, I never meant—" "Silence," the king roared. "You will not speak in my court. You will remember your place." John lowered his head. His fists clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. His place. Always his place. Just a soldier. Just human. But Sarah's voice cut through the silence. "No, father. He will not be silent. Not to me. His words have value. More value than the empty flattery I hear from the nobles every day." The chamber erupted. Some nobles shouted in outrage, others gasped, others shook their heads in disbelief. A princess defying her king? For a human? It was unthinkable. That night. The king summoned Sarah in private. John was ordered to remain outside the chamber, but through the heavy doors he could still hear the echoes of their argument. "You will end this foolishness," the king thundered. "You will stop speaking to him, stop walking with him. You will forget this soldier." And Sarah's voice, softer but unyielding, replied, "I cannot forget him. I will not. He is my choice." The sound of the king's hand slamming against the throne made John's chest tighten. He wanted to rush in to defend her, but he knew doing so would only worsen her punishment. So he stood there, his jaw clenched, his heart aching while she fought for him inside. Later, when she emerged, her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. John moved to support her, but she shook her head. "I am not weak," she whispered, though her voice cracked. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked quietly, "Why fight for me? You could have ended this tonight. It would be easier." Her pale eyes turned toward him, unseeing yet piercing straight into his soul. "Because, John, you are not just a guard. You are my friend. You are my voice in colors I cannot see. And," she hesitated, her lips trembling, "because I feel something I do not have words for. Something I cannot let them take away." John's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her he felt it too, that every heartbeat was louder when she was near. that his world felt empty when she was gone, but he swallowed the words. Not yet. The days that followed grew harder. Whispers followed them everywhere. Nobles mocked John, calling him the blind princess's pet. Soldiers sneered, saying he was a fool chasing a dream that could never be real. Even some humans looked at him with doubt, afraid his actions would shame their species in front of the council, but Sarah stood firm. Every time they walked together, she held her head high, her steps steady. She never let go of his arm, never wavered. And each time she did, John felt pride swell in his chest, mixed with fear of what it might cost her. Then one evening beneath the moons, she asked the question that would change everything. "John," she whispered, her hand brushing against his, "if I asked you to stay, not as a guard but as my partner, would you?" His heart stopped. He stared at her, every part of him screaming yes. But he thought of the king, the council, the walls between their worlds. Slowly, he took her hand in his and whispered, "I would stay. I would stay forever." Her pale eyes softened. She leaned closer, her forehead brushing against his. "Then it is decided?" she murmured. "No matter what they say, I choose you." And in that fragile, defiant moment, both of them knew the conflict had only just begun. The palace of Veyr had never been so tense. Every hallway whispered with rumors. Every noble seemed to wear the same sly smile when Sarah passed by. They thought she was foolish. They thought she would bend to her father's will. But Sarah had already made her choice, and no amount of sneering glances could shake her heart. John, however, felt the weight of it pressing down every day. He knew what it meant for her. She was not just any woman. She was a princess, heir to a throne that had ruled for centuries. By choosing him, she risked losing everything she had ever known. Her title, her crown, her honor in the eyes of her people. And yet, when she was with him, she seemed lighter, stronger, almost fearless. One evening, after another long day of whispers and cold stares, Sarah and John stood in the palace garden. The glowing flowers around them swayed gently, as if bowing to the courage it took for them to stand there together. "John," she said softly, her fingers tightening around his. "Do you regret it?" He frowned. "Regret what?" "Me," she whispered. "The trouble I've brought you. The shame. Perhaps it would be easier if we pretended this never began." John stared at her, stunned. "Easier? Maybe. But right doesn't mean easy, Sarah. And being with you, it's the only thing that's ever felt right." Her lips trembled, and, for a moment, her usual calm cracked. "If I choose you, I lose my place as princess. I lose my father's trust, perhaps even my people's respect. But if I do not choose you," she drew in a shaky breath, "then I lose myself." John wanted to answer, but before he could, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the garden. The king had come. He was not alone. His advisors followed, their robes dragging across the glowing grass. His face was a storm, cold and merciless. "Sarah," he said sharply, his voice slicing through the night. "You will end this nonsense tonight." Sarah's back straightened, but her hand never left John's. "No, father. Tonight I will speak the truth." The king's eyes burned. "Do you defy me in front of my court? Do you throw away centuries of dignity for a soldier from a child race?" Her chin lifted. "I throw away nothing. You think my blindness made me weak, but it has made me strong. I have lived my life without sight, and still I walk proudly. And now, I have chosen love, not because it is easy, but because it is true. That does not make me weak. It makes me stronger than you realize." Ancient counselors gasped. Some whispered angrily. Others turned their eyes away, unwilling to watch. No one had ever heard a princess speak to her king like this. John's heart pounded. He wanted to step between them, to shield her from her father's wrath, but he forced himself to stay still. This was her battle. The king's voice thundered. "You would give up your crown? Your future? For him?" Sarah's pale eyes shone, unseeing yet fierce. If my crown costs me love, then it is not worth wearing. If my future does not include him, then it is not mine to claim. I will not live a life chosen for me. I will live the one I choose. The silence that followed was crushing. Even the glowing flowers seemed to still. Finally, the king spoke, his voice heavy with fury. Then you are no daughter of mine. John's chest tightened like a blade had struck through him. He opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah squeezed his hand, steady and sure. I am still your daughter, she said quietly. But I will not be your prisoner. With that, she turned, guiding John away from the garden, away from the throne, away from the chains her father had tried to bind her with. Her steps were steady. Her head was high. For the first time in her life, Sarah walked not as a princess bound by duty, but as a woman free to love, and John, silent, awestruck, realized something as he followed her into the night. She had not chosen him because she needed protection. She had chosen him because she was stronger than anyone gave her credit for, stronger than even he had known. She had chosen love. She had chosen freedom. And now there was no turning back. Life, after Sarah's choice, was nothing like the fairy tales humans once told. It was not endless joy nor instant freedom. It was struggle, sharp, heavy, and constant. The palace that once opened its halls to Sarah now closed its doors. Her chambers were stripped of luxury. Servants who once bowed to her now turned away when she passed. The nobles whispered as though she was cursed, calling her the fallen princess. Some laughed openly at the thought of a blind heir who threw away her throne for a human soldier. John saw it all. Every insult, every sneer, every quiet cruelty meant to remind her of what she had lost. Each one burned in his chest like fire. He wanted to fight them, to silence every voice that mocked her. But Sarah always stopped him. They cannot take from me what I do not give them, she whispered. And I will not give them my pride. But though she stood tall in public, John could see the toll it took when she was alone. At night, when the palace was quiet, she would sit by the window, her pale eyes turned toward the twin moons above. She would sit for hours, silent, as though waiting for an answer from the stars. One evening, John sat beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. Her voice was soft. "I wonder what you look like in this light. The moons must be painting your face in silver. I wish I could see it, John. Just once." He felt a heavy ache in his chest. She had never complained about her blindness before. She had never begged the universe for sight. But now, when she loved and longed, she wanted to see. Not the palace, not the crown, not the world. Just him. He took her hand carefully. "If I could give you my eyes, Sarah, I would." Without hesitation, her fingers tightened around his. "I know," she whispered, "and that is why I do not need to see you to love you. But still," her voice broke slightly, "it is my one wish." John sat there, holding her hand, making a silent promise to himself. Somehow, some way, he would find a way to give her what she longed for. But outside their quiet moments, the world grew crueler. The other guards mocked John openly now. The princess's pet, they called him, her little human shadow. Some warned him that he was dragging Earth's reputation into the mud. Humanity was still proving itself to the galaxy, and his romance with Sarah made humans look reckless, unworthy of respect. At times, John doubted himself. He lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had ruined her life. She had lost her crown, her father's love, her place among her people, all because of him. The weight pressed down until he could barely breathe. But then Sarah would reach for his hand in the darkness and whisper, "Do not carry the blame alone. This is not just your choice, it is mine too." Those words always saved him, always reminded him that they were walking this path together. Still, the days stretched long, heavy, with hardship. The council avoided Sarah. The nobles treated her as if she were invisible. Once, when she entered a banquet hall with John, every conversation stopped. The silence was sharper than any insult. Sarah only lifted her chin higher, but John saw the faint tremor in her hand as she gripped his arm. Later she whispered to him, "They can starve me of their kindness. They can strip me of my title. But they cannot touch what I hold here." She pressed her hand gently against his chest over his heart. It was in that moment John realized something important. She had lost her crown, yes, but she had not lost her strength. Her fire burned brighter than the twin suns of Vayar. And yet, no matter how strong she was, John could not forget her quiet confession by the window. Her wish, her longing. The thought haunted him. When he was on duty, when he walked the markets, when he lay awake at night, it was always there. "I wish I could see you, even just once." It was not enough to love her. He wanted to give her more. He wanted to give her sight, and in the depths of his heart a dangerous hope began to grow. Hope can be a dangerous thing, but for John it became a lifeline. From the night Sarah whispered her wish to see him, just once, he could not rest. The words echoed in his mind every hour. He guarded the palace with his body, but in his heart, he began guarding a promise. "I will find a way." At first it seemed impossible. The Vayari healers had tried for centuries to restore sight to those born blind, but no medicine, no spell of science, no machine of light had ever worked. Yet John was human, and humans were stubborn in ways the galaxy did not expect. Where the Vayari saw impossibility, John saw only a challenge. Whenever he was off duty, he searched. He visited alien traders in the markets, scientists in the city, and even outlaws who whispered of illegal experiments. Many shook their heads at him. Foolish human. No one can give sight where there was none. Others laughed. You think love will change biology? But John did not stop. Each failure only sharpened his resolve. He thought of Sarah sitting by the window, her pale eyes lifted to the stars, longing for a face she could not see. He thought of her bravery, how she had defied a king for him. If she could risk everything, then he could risk anything. At last, hope came from an unlikely place. In a small lab hidden in the underlevels of the city, John met a pair of human and Vayari researchers. They spoke in hushed voices, fearful of the council's judgment. "We have been working on hybrid implants," they explained, "a bridge between your species' neural patterns and ours. They are experimental, unstable, and very dangerous." John's hands trembled as he listened. But they might work. They might, the human scientist admitted. Or they might fail. She could lose what little light perception she has. She could even... He stopped, unwilling to say the word. John closed his eyes. The risk was terrifying, but then he remembered Sarah's trembling voice. "I wish I could see you, even just once." He opened his eyes again. Steady. "Then let's do it." When John told Sarah, she wept. For the first time since he had known her, she allowed herself to cry openly. "Even if it fails," she whispered, holding his hands tight, "you have already given me more than I dreamed. You gave me hope. That is more than enough." The surgery was arranged in secret. No nobles, no counselors, not even the king knew. Only John and Sarah, and the small team of doctors brave enough to try. The night of the operation, John sat outside, the chamber. Hours dragged by like years. He paced the floor until his legs ached, then sat with his head in his hands, whispering prayers to every god he had ever heard of. His soldier's heart had faced war without fear, but now it trembled, like a child's. He could face death, but he could not face losing her. At last the doors opened. The doctors stepped out, their faces pale. "It is done," one said softly. John rushed inside. Sarah sat upright on the bed, her hands trembling in her lap. For a moment, her eyes were still pale, unfocused. John's chest sank in despair. But then, slowly, her eyes shifted. They blinked. They focused. And for the first time in her life they saw, her breath caught. Tears spilled instantly down her cheeks. Her lips parted as if she could not believe her own senses. Her gaze lifted and landed on him. John froze under her stare. He had dreamed of this moment, but nothing prepared him for it. "You?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're smiling." John dropped to his knees beside her bed, tears blurring his own vision. He took her hands, pressing them against his face. "I wanted the first thing you ever saw to be me. Because you gave me a reason to live, Sarah. And I wanted you to see what you have given me, love." She touched his face with shaking fingers, but this time her eyes followed. She traced his jaw not only with touch but with sight, and then she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I thought I was blind," she whispered through her tears. "But now I see. I was never blind. Not with you." And in that fragile, glowing moment, the impossible had become real. A blind princess had opened her eyes, and the first sight she chose was the human who loved her. The news of the miracle spread faster than fire in dry grass. By the next morning, every hall of the palace buzzed with whispers. "The blind princess can see." The human gave her sight. Impossible, and yet true. For years the Veyari had failed to cure blindness. The counselors, the king, the nobles, all had declared it unchangeable. And now a human soldier had done what no one else could. The nobles who once mocked Sarah now looked at her with awe and fear. Those who once sneered at John now studied him as though he carried secrets beyond their reach. But none of that mattered to Sarah. Her world had transformed overnight. For the first time, she awoke to see the morning light spilling across her bed. She blinked at the way it painted the walls in gold, at the way shadows danced when she moved her hand. She laughed like a child discovering wonder for the first time, and when John entered her chamber she froze, staring at him. He felt suddenly nervous under her gaze, more nervous than he had ever been facing a battlefield. "What?" he asked, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. "You," she whispered, stepping closer. "You are so much more than I imagined. Stronger, yes, but also softer. Your eyes, they hold me." John swallowed hard. His chest ached with love so fierce it almost broke him. "I was afraid you'd be disappointed," he admitted. Sarah shook her head, tears sparkling in her new eyes. "No. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Those words carved themselves into John's soul. Yet even in their joy, the storm had not fully passed. The king summoned them to the throne room. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. The court gathered, waiting for his judgment. For a long moment he said nothing, only stared at Sarah, as if seeing her for the first time. Finally his voice came low and heavy. "You defied me. You cast away your title. And yet, you returned with a miracle." Sarah's chin lifted proudly. "It was not a miracle, Father. It was love. And it was him." She nodded toward John. The king's eyes flickered to the human soldier. Once John had been invisible to him. Now he was undeniable. A man who had given the princess her sight could not be dismissed. The silence stretched until it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then, slowly, the king's expression softened. Not fully, but enough to release the tension choking the room. "Perhaps," he said at last, "I judged too quickly. Perhaps humans are more than reckless children." It was not a blessing, not an embrace, but it was the beginning of acceptance. And for John and Sarah, it was enough. Days turned into weeks, and the palace began to change. Nobles who once mocked them now bowed low. Guards who once sneered now saluted John with respect. Where there had been scorn, there was now quiet admiration. But John cared little for their approval. His greatest reward was watching Sarah discover the world. He watched her gaze at sunsets with wide eyes, whispering that no words could capture such beauty. He laughed as she stared at simple things like bread rising in the oven, or rain running down glass as though they were treasures beyond price. He held her hand when she stumbled, and his heart swelled every time she smiled at him with sight, and loved together. One night under the twin moons, she stood with him in the gardens where they had first spoken. The glowing flowers swayed just as they had before, but now she could see their soft light. She turned to him, tears glistening. "Do you remember what you said?" she whispered. "That blue feels like the ocean. That green feels like life. Now I see them, John. And they are beautiful. But none of them compare to you." John pulled her into his arms, his voice thick. "Syrah, you gave me a place in this galaxy. You gave me love. If I gave you sight, then it was only a fraction of what you've given me." She pressed her forehead to his, just as she had when she was blind. "Then we are even." But John shook his head, smiling through his tears. "No. You'll always be the greater miracle." Years later, when their children asked how they had met, John and Sarah told them this story, not of a soldier and a princess, but of two souls who defied a kingdom and found each other anyway. They told them that love was not blind, nor weak, nor foolish. It was the strongest force in the universe, strong enough to make the impossible real. And in the end, the galaxy did not just remember the human soldier or the blind princess. They remembered the love that changed both, and proved once more that humanity was worthy not because of power, but because of heart. For what could be more human than giving someone the gift of sight, and choosing to be the first thing they see?